Welcome back. I'm Sheldon McLeod. This is Thinking Out Loud here on the SaltWire Network. And this is an opportunity for me to talk about stories. And sometimes we get ahead of some of the things that are in the news. Sometimes we're following up on things that are in the news. And I wanted to just take a second to recognize a letter to the editor at saltwire.com that came in. Voice of the people, mental health support needed in schools. And this was written by a grade 12 student at CP Allen saying, I want to recognize the tremendous job the principal, the staff at CPA did, the police, and everyone did keeping students safe. But there also is this call to action. It says, as the Nova Scotia Teachers Union president said, there's an increase in violence in schools since the return to classes following the pandemic, and talks about mental health supports. And that is something that, well, the Nova Scotia Teachers Union is bringing forward with a news release of its own, calling for government to do something. And what is that something? Well, that's what we are going to speak with the president of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union about. Ryan Lutes joins us here today from Halifax. And thank you very much again for speaking up. Tell me, this incident of violence at CP Allen, I know that has brought a lot of people to this conversation about violence in schools. Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about what your perspective of what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what happened on Monday is really troubling. There's kind of a sacred bond that when school staffs, when teachers, when kids get sent to school, that they're coming home safely. And obviously, that didn't happen on Monday. And I want to praise that school staff because they contained the incident. There was no spillover, so the procedures, it looked like it worked. But what we now need to do is go back and look at, this is one example of what we believe is, and what I hear from teachers is, increasing violence in our schools. And now once our focus is turned away from, once we know CP Allen is okay and they're doing okay and they're set up for success, and they're going to need quite a lot of healing and time and support. What we are calling government to do is really look at the broad system, every school in our province, and look at what can we do to make our schools as safe as we can, because clearly this is we've seen kind of a recent rise in violent incidences, and we really want to make sure that our schools are as safe as possible for our kids and staff.
I heard a report that suggested hundreds of times police have been called to schools in HRM specifically over the last few years. You mentioned that this is apparently an increasing trend after the pandemic lockdown. What do you feel is happening right now?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to conflate this very serious issue with nothing maybe could have prevented this. This is certainly, this type of very serious incident is not commonplace in our schools, thank goodness. But what we are hearing is that, violence in general, a broad spectrum of violence, and some more serious than others, is increasing. Part of that is I think post-pandemic, just society has been under a lot of stress. Kids are under a lot of stress. And, I don't feel that the resources in the system have kept up with the needs of our kids, and that's a part of it. So one of the things that we're calling for, again, is this broad-based look at what can we do to help mental health services? What can we do to make our schools as safe as we can? Because it's something that doesn't seem like it's going away, and it deserves more than a Band-Aid approach, which is kind of what we've seen in the past. We have a lot of people in our school system, school leaders, teachers, system leaders, wanting to do the right thing, but we need a broad-based system-wide approach to make sure that every school in this province is as safe as we possibly can.
I saw a comment from someone who's a consultant for education saying this is about a lack of discipline. This is about not having the tools to put consequences to actions. Is there any merit to that?
I don't want to get too prescriptive right now in what I think the solutions are, because, there's going to be a different solution for every school and for different teachers and for different kids. And that's why I think it's so important that we take a holistic look at this. And maybe that's one part of a solution, but, mental health supports is another part. Poverty plays into this. There's so many factors that play into increasing violence in our schools that I think it'd be irresponsible for me to point to one thing and say this is the answer. But that's really why we're calling upon government to look at this holistically, system-wide, and see what can be done, and really take a comprehensive approach. Because again, if teachers are telling me, and it's not just this one incident that's been bringing this to bear, for a number of years now, teachers have been expressing that violence in their schools is increasing. And so we need to, our kids don't deserve that. They deserve better than that. Our staffs deserve better than that. And we need to take a comprehensive approach.
I spoke with someone a few years ago about a change in contract language that was assigning teachers to more classes, in fact, eliminating something called UITs. What are UITs, and how might that play into or predicted some of this, some of the concern over violence now?
Yeah, so a number of years ago, the previous government made some staffing cuts, specifically in HRM high schools, and so what they did was they eliminated a number of positions in buildings, and essentially made teachers teach more, which made them less available to provide supports in different ways. One of the supports that they were providing was hallway duty, cafeteria duty, might be small group student support. So those supports were kind of taken away from those schools. And I also want to be clear that those supports were never given to schools outside of HRM. And we feel that that's not right. So one of the things that we're calling on government to do is to reinstate those supports that were available a number of years ago, reverse those staffing cuts, and then increase staffing at schools around the province so that all schools can benefit from that. Because one of the things that I've been hearing, and I experienced it myself last year as a teacher at Halifax West, but one of the things we hear often from school staffs is, my school doesn't feel as safe as it was 3 years ago because there are less caring adults in the building and there's less teachers kind of available to build relationships with kids in the hallways, maybe that they don't teach. And that's one of the things that I think some people that in schools don't realize is that, the school is a community. It's not just it's not just the students that you teach that are important. To teachers, every student in that school is important, and building relationships with those kids is extremely important. And it makes school a safer place when kids have connections with multiple different teachers, even ones that don't teach them. And so the school staffs and the CPLN staff told me this, is that my school doesn't feel as safe as it was 3 years ago, and that's a real problem. And I think that reversing these staffing cuts and taking those supports outside of HRM would go a long way to making our schools feel and be safer for our kids.
There was a conversation I had with someone with the Nova Scotia Parents for Public Education who felt there has been a breakdown in communication, that there doesn't seem to be as much dialogue between the school community and the home community. I don't know if that's something you can speak to directly, but I'm wondering or curious about your thoughts on changes to governance models, changes to the way that the school community is supported by the parents and the volunteers as opposed to an elected school board.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that, I think that's, having public voice in education is extremely important. And certainly, that the NSTU, as we believe school boards provided a service, provided some accountability, gave parents an outlet. They knew who to call. They had someone whose job it was specifically to hear their concerns about schools, and then to advocate on behalf of those parents and on behalf of the school system. And without that, it really has created, I think, and I'm a dad. I'm a dad that, I probably has a little bit of above average, understanding of the school system, right? Because of my involvement. And if there's a problem in my kid's school that I want to advocate for as a parent, I'm not convinced after the admin team at the school, I wouldn't know who to go to. And I think that's a real breakdown, and it's a real lack of foresight by the previous government, by taking away that kind of layer of advocacy. Because at the end of the day, parents knew, okay, if things weren't working for their school, they had someone. They might not know, on the tip of the tongue who that school board member was, but they knew that they could call someone, and that they knew that was their complete, focus is school board, governance and advocacy. And I think now parents are expressing to me, geez, I don't know who to turn to. And that's a real problem. And I think whenever we take public voice out of education, that's an issue. And we don't want to play politics with education. We want stakeholders in education really, really, bringing forward their concerns and kind of steering the school system in the way that is best for communities.
One of the calls to action, as you've just laid out, is for government to reverse some of those cuts. We're at the start of a legislative session. A budget's about to be produced later today. What is it that Ryan Lutes and the NSTU would like to see from this government to help support some of the concerns or address some of those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think I would love to see in this budget, those cuts reversed. And, it's not a massive amount of money. We're talking about, I think the numbers that we had when the cuts were made were, 100 teachers in HRM. So, conceivably, a few hundred teachers, which I get, to you or I is a lot of money. But in the system, that's really, kind of a drop in the bucket. And it's not only, it's money that was really well spent. Keeping our schools safe and providing additional resources and supports to kids is, in my view, the best way that we can spend our money. And teachers are feeling, their schools feel different after those cuts. And so that's a problem. So I'd love to see this government, and it's something that this government came out against. When the cuts were made by the previous government, this government, voiced opposition to those cuts. And so I would love to see, and I think parents and teachers would love to see commitments in this budget to reverse those cuts. And again, bring those supports outside of HRM, because every school in this province, every kid in the province deserves to have those supports. So I would love to see that. Mental health supports is something that the union has been talking about for a long time, and teachers have been talking about. So we know, especially post-pandemic, or we're not out of the pandemic yet, but that kids have more needs, and so mental health supports, and our classrooms are becoming more complex. And again, I don't think our resources have kept up with those needs. And so I'd like to see a real commitment from this government to education. And I get that, the government's major focus right now is healthcare, which obviously is important for everyone. But I believe there's enough capacity in this government to focus on two things at once. And, education is important. And we need to make sure that our kids and school communities and teachers and school staffs are getting what they need. And I'd love to see some commitment from this government in that. One of the other issues that we've been talking about for quite a long time is the teacher shortage. And so something that we would like to see in this budget is a real, some programs to deal with recruitment and retention of teachers. And all of these factors go hand in hand. We want to create a profession that people want to get into. Safe schools are a massive part of creating a profession that folks want to get into.
Without speculating on the incident at CP Allen or being alarmist, the number of incidents of violence appear to be on the rise. What does this prognosis look like? What does it look like for the remainder of the school year if we don't see some of these changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we have a school community that's grieving and reeling from this, and it hits all. I think anyone that participates in our school system, whether they're a student, whether they're a staff member, whether they're a parent, it hits too close to home. So I think it would be really just restore some confidence in the system, because again, I think amazing things are happening in our school buildings every single day. But it would restore some confidence in the system if government would really commit to taking a broad-based look at this, in a comprehensive way, and providing in the short term some resources to really to augment the resources in our school and the number of people in our schools. And so I think that would give a lot of confidence to teachers and the system and parents. Again, I don't want to be alarmist, just like you. An incident that happened on Monday is extremely concerning. We're lucky that it's an isolated incident, but like you said, violence in schools isn't. We hear, there was a stabbing at a high school in October. There was, some other violent incidences at another high school in November. I've heard concerns from, from teachers in Sydney, where there seems to be like a rising level of violence there. So it just seems like this is happening, and it's happening across our province. And I think our government has a responsibility to make our schools as safe as we can. So I think we need to see some commitment to undertake a process and to augment the people in our system to make sure that we have the right number of people in our system to support our kids.
And we covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything else, Ryan Lutes, that we didn't mention?
No, I just again want to express that the whole of the NSTU and the 9,500 members, we have our kind of our eyes on CPL and our hearts are open to them. We're thinking about them because that community needs us, and it needs all of us thinking about them, making sure that they're set up for success, making sure that they have the supports that they need to heal from this. And then we need to really turn our mind to system-wide, how can we make our schools as safe as we possibly can, because our kids and teachers and school staffs deserve that.
President of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, Ryan Lutes. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Sheldon.